Welcome to G220 Radio. Tonight, we're going to be talking about, you ever hear that phrase? It's Christianity is a relationship. It's not a religion. It's a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Well, we're going to talk about that tonight here on G220 Radio with Mike Miller, with the original Natty P, episode number 518, live tonight, G220 Radio. Welcome to this episode of G220 Radio. Here we are, as you can see, Mike Miller, the original Natty P, back out of retirement. No, he is here with us. This is an episode that we were going to do, I think, what was it, maybe 2 months ago, maybe?
Yeah,
it's like November.
End of October or something.
Yeah, this was an episode we had on the schedule. We had to make some change of plans, and then we had some other episodes and things that were in there that we just didn't get around to it right away. And here we are in February now, the second week of February, and we're going to talk about this. This is an important discussion. This came about. Some of you probably already forgot. There was this article going around called from the 1517 site. And I don't really know much about this site, whether it's I think it has to do something with Lutherans, right? Am I right on that, or is it something?
Yeah, it's a Lutheran.
It's a Lutheran site. Yeah. Okay, so so this article was going around talking about Christianity is not about a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and so Nathaniel was like, "Hey, let's do an episode on this." And so me and Mike were like, "Okay." So we had this scheduled. Like I said, we had to make some change of plans, but here we are, and now we're going to talk about it. But before we do, I just want to thank Mike for holding it down the last 2 weeks. And even, I saw you had some technical difficulties last week, and yet you still persevered. And I know that's not easy when you're trying to figure out, especially when you got guests, because if it's just you by yourself, you can just kind of, I'll either roll through this or I'll just, end it. Yeah. But thank you, brother, for holding it down, even with those difficulties. I know it can be stressful sometimes when you don't know what's going on.
It was, so part of it was one of the guests we couldn't see nor hear, but obviously they could see us and hear us. So just trying to figure out all of that and trying to use Zoom, which we don't pay for anymore, getting the message right in the middle. Yeah, it was a very exciting, stressful, and then kept messing up Kofi's name. I felt really bad.
Yeah, that was, I saw that. I was like, as soon as you was introducing him, it was like, Mike forgot to guess his name. But hey, when you got all those technical difficulties going on, I don't think a lot of people realize this. There's so many things when you're trying to host and you're trying to make sure everything's working properly. You're trying to make sure that the audio's coming through. You hear your guest. Also that the people that are watching are hearing you. So many things is happening. And you're trying to control and run all that. And then, things aren't working. And then you start to get the like, oh no, what's going on here? I need to get this fixed. And you're live and you want to do it. Just things happen, man. That's part of life.
And we went live after already having problems for 15, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like, okay, this is the backup plan. And now it's not working like it should have. At least what I thought it was. And then I'm sitting here, it's like, well, what else can I do? And just scrap it. OBS, YouTube, back to the Zoom, back to the good old days. Let's get through this thing.
Yeah. Well, all right. Nathaniel, how you been, man? It's been a while.
Pretty good, up and down. Good now. I had the disease like between Christmas and several weeks ago. So I went to I went to the doctor. It was kind of a waste of time. They basically said you have COVID, and now we're going to send you out to die. It was kind of a raunchy experience. I was pretty upset, but I came home. I didn't die, surprisingly. and
There you go. Beat the
uh,
odds.
yeah. But now I'm a statistic, and just trying to live my life one day at a time. I don't know. It's a cold world out there, I guess.
Yeah.
Other than that's good in doing TikToks and typing stuff and getting back into writing a little bit. So
yeah, doing the TikTok thing. The TikTok thing is like for young people, and that's why me and Mike don't do that.
Yeah,
there's
but
all
my work
kinds
does it.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
actually got some pretty good content.
Yeah.
it's a way to make money. I don't make money at it, but it's basically what people use it for. There's no way anybody could make a living off of it, but a lot of people use it to drum up business for their other projects and their other adventures or business or whatever. So it's a good way of advertising and stuff like that. I watched one guy. I've seen his YouTubes too, where he's it's not like a pawn shop, but he does gold and silver deals and all kinds of stuff like that, and does deals over TikTok. So it's a neat platform. It's owned by the Chinese, so it's
there you go.
It's heavily censored, and they know who I am now and everything. But
they already did. It's okay.
It's true. I forgot. The president's hologram already gave him my dossier.
Well, if he's referring to TikTok, I think Ben Dixon said it's pretty effective. If that's what he's referring to, is the TikTok. All right, so now that we talked about some of those things, 6 minutes into the program, we better get moving here before everybody takes off and says, hey, what are these guys talking about? TikTok? No, let's not listen to TikTok. Let's talk about what's going on here with this article. Now, I'm just going to put it out here. I titled this episode here tonight, It's Not a Relationship, It's a Religion. The reason I did that, it's a play on the phrase that we hear of it's not a religion, it's a personal relationship with Jesus. It's a relationship. It's not a religion, it's a relationship. And I think what tends to happen, it's a pet peeve of mine when I hear people say that, because it's both. You can't say that Christianity is not a religion, because if you look up the definition of religion, if you try to understand what is meant by religion, you would see that a religion is to adhere to a practice of beliefs and following a God. And that is something that we do in Christianity. We follow the one true and living triune God of the universe, the creator of all things. And he has laid out for us a way in which we come before him. And thankfully, when he died on the cross and that veil was torn, we can boldly come before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords now, right, in prayer. But he still has we still have a set of beliefs and practices that we do as Christians. The problem, I think, that tends to happen is some people can be too religious in the sense where they start to put practices as a means of having this relationship or a means of achieving or earning righteousness before God. Works kind of things. Like you have to keep these sacraments. You have to do this and that to be right with God, where we know that man is justified with God by faith in Christ, who finished it on the cross. It was accomplished. It was completed. And we are a sanctifying work of God. He is sanctifying us over time. Like we come to Christ, we are justified once for all, and yet then we have this process of sanctification. It happens. So my pet peeve with it is when people say that, and often when they'll say someone is religious or it's because of their religion, they'll make it seem, or they'll connect that with like legalism or being judgmental or kind of being a Pharisee. And so that's why I think we have to have a good balance of it. Then on the other side of that, it's kind of like where this article seems to be going is, well, it's not a personal relationship at all.
Right.
And we do have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It would be wrong to say that. And I think Nathaniel is going to lay this out for us here because he's put together a kind of thoughts on this and as far as this conversation that we're having, which stemmed from this 1517 article. And so we're going to kind of get into that. Mike, any thoughts on this before we get in and allow Nathaniel to kind of lead us in this?
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts. Finish the show right now. Bam, done.
It's over. Done.
No.
Don't even need to go.
Don't even need Natty P. No, obviously this has been around ever since Jefferson Bethke kind of made it popular. I just checked his YouTube video that came out, 35 million views. That's not a small number of views. Though it's kind of been around for just over 10 years now. And so this is something to deal with and to think about it. And even listening to the 1517 article that and kind of in reference to what we're discussing about, I wasn't even not like fully like I completely disagree with you.
Right.
You heretic Lutherans, you know, like that just wasn't a thought. Not that Lutherans are always heretics, but I'll make that.
Unless they don't belong to the Missouri Synod.
Yeah, ELCA, but that's a different story in a different religion.
Some of us were baptized in the ELCA. Watch yourself. No, I'm just kidding.
Some need to be rebaptized.
They're apostated. They'll get out. So
that's why those Anabaptists were persecuted.
So you have this thing, and I think there is a corrective that we should heed here in the article. That would be counter to what we would understand in Western culture and our very individualistic culture, which is what I think they're kind of aiming at. But and obviously we'll probably get this more. I think it is something to talk about because their corrective, while I think is too far, is in fact correct in some of its points. And to think about and make clear and proper distinctions will help us to understand that, yes, it's about a relationship that we have with Christ, but this relationship with Christ is never just about us. Also, it's this both and category. Even when they use the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6, I think there's things that we can note that even in the text that shows this to be not just something that is communal, but never disconnected from the community. And I think that's kind of
right.
When we think about these things and when we discuss this, I think there is some corrective that can be done that even Jefferson Bethke, I think is how his name is, has even come out to make in his own like corrections. So that is, I think something that we need to continue to think about, especially in our culture where we tend to be individualistic. Church is a social club. These are kind of important topics to think about, and how we relate with our Savior and with each other.
Yeah. And before we get into this, Nathaniel, I think one of the things we want to put forth here at G220 Radio is, and we try to do this, we try to be consistent in this, we try to put this forth in many of our episodes, is we have to come at things with a balance, right? We have to look at this with balance, because what tends to happen is when there's an issue that arises, people tend to go too far to the left or to the right. We have to have a balance where we look at it critically, we look at it fairly, and we say, okay, let's look and see. Excuse me. Let's look and see where they're right, and then where they're wrong. Nathaniel, I'm going to go ahead and I need to get a drink.
All right.
So go ahead and share your thoughts, and then we'll get into this article.
All right. Yeah, I thought what both of you guys said was right on time. So just with the balance of it all, the questions 1 and 3 of the Catechism, the first one's what's the chief end of man? To glorify God and to enjoy Him. So you see that enjoyment is a personal kind of enjoyment. I get enjoyment out of God, and I also glorify Him and worship Him. And so I'm held personally accountable for that, as we'll probably get into. The other thing, because the first thing you talked about, Ricky, is it's not just a relationship; it's also a religion. So that's kind of what I'm going for right here. Is the third question of the Catechism is, what do the Scriptures principally teach? And the answer is, the Scriptures principally teach what man is to believe concerning God and what duty God requires of man. I think that all religions will contain both piety and practice. Piety oftentimes has to do with the affections and the what the Catechism says, what man is to believe concerning God, and then practice then would be those rites, those rituals that that God requires of man. As you're kind of hitting on this, I think that the rites of the Christian religion, we call them the means of grace. They're not duties that you do to earn something, but they are a way of having that personal relationship with God.
Mhm.
The rite of baptism, the Lord's Supper, prayer is included in the means of grace. Bible reading, preaching, the ministry of the Word and Sacrament. These the corporate fellowship even would it's not chiefly thought of in the means of grace, but it is a means of grace. And through this is how we have our relationship. So it can't be only a relationship on one side, but I think talking more to the okay, so let me say this. So the ancients had this problem of the one and the many, and how do you solve the one and the many? Where there seems to be a one, an essence that binds all things together, and there is also many. As you see, there is something human about all human beings, which is the one, and then you see individual. There's three individuals on the podcast. There's the many, and so in the Christian religion, there's lots of little answers, and the big answer, the big solution to the one and the many is clearly the Trinity. But in the Christian religion, there's many answers to the one and the many, the problem being solved. So we are called a body with many members. So we are one body of Christians, and there are many members that all serve one body. So we see this kind of happen all throughout the Christian religion, with mutual indwellings and mutual partakings and whatnot. And so far as the article, I think so. I surveyed. I don't know. Anytime you guys want to butt in, it's fine.
Well, let's kind of read a little bit of this article, and then we'll kind of go from there, because there is something that I think is very, very important here when we look at this article, and hopefully you who are watching can see this fairly well. On my screen, I can read it clearly. Hopefully you guys can too. Otherwise, I can make it bigger.
All right, I'll just give you my hot take on the article really quick, and then let's get into it.
Well, let me
save
read
the take
and
for the end.
Save some of your take there. Just, I mean, we can get into that, but there's something here that I want to look at. It says Christianity is not about a personal relationship with Jesus. Then it says Christianity is not a solo endeavor, not a private relationship between Jesus and me. It says we talk about having personal things. We employ a personal trainer to help us shed pounds to get that coveted beach body. We open a personal bank account to manage our finances. And please keep your hands off our personal property and your eyes out of our personal diary. Christians, especially evangelicals, import this language into their faith as well. We talk about having a personal relationship with Jesus, or working on our personal relationship with him, are desiring that relationship to grow, to deepen, to become more intimate. Now, this is, I think we're going to talk about this, but this is where I kind of want to go right first here is Christianity is not about a personal relationship with Jesus. It says, here's the thing. Christianity is not about a personal relationship with Jesus. The phrase is never found in the Bible, and the whole biblical witness runs, contrary to it. So Christianity is not found in the Bible, or not Christianity. This phrase is not found in the Bible, right? This personal relationship with Jesus. let's get rid of this idea right now, because there's lots of words that aren't in the Bible. I've been hearing this nonstop, this argument, not for this, but for the Trinity, or well, the word Trinity is not in the Bible, so therefore it's not a biblical understanding or teaching.
Right.
We need to get away with that. We need to do away with that. We have terminology for a reason, and I think we should use that terminology when it comes to the Trinity and omnipresent, omniscience, words that aren't in the Bible, but they explain what is taught within the Bible. And so I think that is good for us to have. Now, just because a phrase is not there or a word is not there doesn't make it false, because what is in there is, when we look at the scriptures as a whole, we can see these concepts that are trying to be explained by these phrases. Now, again, as I said in the beginning, this phrase isn't always the best. It isn't always helpful when people say this, because usually it's contrasting like relationship with religion, as if it's two different things. And so therefore, I think this is not a good start to this article here, because you're already saying like, well, this isn't in the Bible. Well, Lutheran isn't in the Bible, and you guys are Lutherans. So, you know what I mean? That it just doesn't necessarily validate a person's argument. Any thoughts on that? And then Nathaniel, we'll take it wherever you want.
All right. I mean, technically, if we get down to it, none of the English words that we English speakers read out of our English Bibles, none of those words are in the Bible either, because the Bible is written in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. So, if we held fastidiously to this, if it's not found in the Bible, you can't use the wording. The Bible is built on a metaphysic as well. Like you have to you have to use words and concepts that are not found in the Bible to even understand the Bible. You have to use logic, which is not described in the Bible, to make conscious sense of it. It's these things called first principles. You have to have language. You have to be able to read English. The Bible doesn't teach you how to read English, nor Greek or Hebrew. So there's things that are not in the Bible that we use to understand the Bible, and then there's words and terms that we come up with to speak about the things in the Bible that aren't there. Like the catechism's one. Going to church is another thing that we do every Sunday as Christians, and the phrase "go to church" is not found in the Bible. Now, that the way that we deal with that is that the concept is there, like you said, and we take what we see as a concept and perhaps give another name to it. In Deuteronomy 6, it says, whenever your fathers, you're to talk about these things with your sons as you rise up, as you lie down, whenever you go along the road. And from this verse and others like it, we get the concept of the catechism. So there's catechisms not found in the Bible, but it is an immensely biblical concept of training our children in righteousness. So yeah, I think it really is a bad start to the article. We could pick all that has been set apart, but I definitely think that has to be dispensed with if you're going to deal with this honestly. I guess so.
Well, and if that is going to be somebody's argument, because a word's not found in the Bible,
right,
then the only biblical denomination is Baptist, because John was a Baptist.
That's it.
So there you go. All right, let's add a little levity to the program. Let's move on.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think obviously you have, this idea with it. I think what's more shocking is, and I wish he would have gone more detail. I felt this was very short for what he's trying to prove. So I feel like there's a lot that can be discussed to try to prove his point. But when you think about, okay, this phrase isn't there, and yet what he's not only saying the phrase isn't there, that this concept isn't there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's making, because it's one thing to say the word Trinity isn't in the Bible,
Right.
but the concept is there. I think he's
Right.
trying to make it like kind of when you ask people, is God helps those who helps themselves? Is that in the Bible? And they say yes. Like there's not there. That phrase isn't there. And we would also say that concept isn't there.
Right.
I think that's what he's trying to prove and to go. So it's like, yes, the phrase isn't in there, but even more than that, as if it was in there, and maybe evangelicals think it's in there, the concept is also not in there. In fact, runs contrary to it.
Right.
And I think that's trying to I guess build up that argument that this is just completely unbiblical. This language of a personal relationship. And I mean, obviously, we've already showed our cards what we think about this. I felt like there was a lot that he could have explained and gone to. When my phone stopped reading, I was like, "Well, that was short." With not a lot of biblical evidence to kind of
Yeah.
prove his point. Even though, like I said at the beginning, I didn't disagree with everything he had to say. I think there is a corrective there for us to think about.
Right.
Well, I think that's part of the problem, though, is it's a corrective, and sometimes people go too far where they because again, and Nathaniel, I think you're going to lay this out. We'll go ahead from here, and you can kind of lay this out.
Right.
We do see, because he goes on here to say that this is it's done within the communal or in the community of the church body. And we would say, yes, God does have relationship with the body as a corporate entity, right? But then there's also that individual, personal relationship that we do see. Abraham was a friend of God. Those who have believed in Christ are friends of God, right? There is this, Christ died for me, right? I'm a part of that body, but he died for me. And so therefore we can see some of these things. So Nathaniel, we'll turn it over to you now. Just lay out what you wanted to speak about this article. We won't read through the entirety of the article. Anyone can find this if you go to the 1517. And like I said, it's titled Christianity is Not About a Personal Relationship with Jesus. So from there, we'll go ahead, Nathaniel, and take it away.
All right. So eventually so this weekend I was at church and I surveyed several people. I asked them what they thought about the phrase personal relationship with Jesus, and most of them had somewhere in their comments that it was cringeworthy or tired from overuse or kind of can be confusing. One of the articles that I had sent over to you guys had said that it isn't even helpful anymore. And I guess sometimes based on in our circles, it's not a phrase that's used as much, but you can kind of, so with these Christianese, it kind of has become Christianese for something. And you don't really even think about the wording as much or what it means. It's just a Christianism. And I think, to be charitable, I think I think his name is Chad Bird. Yes. I think he also cringes at the phrase, and and sometime in 2017 he saw the car going towards a ditch and jerked the steering wheel a little too hard. There's a lot of good points in the article.
He should have said, Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah, get us back on course, right? I guess when I was thinking about this article, I kind of thought about it in two parts, because one thing that he says in the article is very true. Christianity is a corporate relationship. So when I was thinking about this, I was thinking in terms of, okay, I want to acknowledge that corporate relationship that he's advocating, because it's most definitely a concept found in the Bible. And then I also had to kind of buck against his thought that personal relationship is in the Bible. So whenever I started off, obviously it's easy to prove the corporate relationship. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 12, talks about how we are many members of one body. And he says, the hand cannot say to the foot, I have no need of you, nor the, let me see, one member. the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor the head to the feet, I have no need of you. And what the picture we get from that is, if my hand on my body suddenly said, I don't need you guys anymore, it'd chop itself off and walk away, and then like Thing from Adam's Family. But in real life, it would sooner or later just fester and rot. And that's kind of a morbid picture, but that's what we get whenever we try to isolate ourselves from the body. We get a festering, rotting member that doesn't grow, doesn't get nourished. And so that aspect of what Mr. Bird's highlighting in this article is very, very true. And there's also something else that's important, is just the various commandments that we could talk about that are necessary. You have to have the corporate body to fulfill. The most famous one probably is, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. You also love one another. By this, all men will know that you're my disciples. And you can't fulfill that duty, that obligation, that commandment of Jesus Christ without being in fellowship in a corporate body with other believers. One thing that I really, really liked in this article is it's in the paragraph right under Christianity is not a solo endeavor. He says at the second paragraph of that section, when we read the Bible, right there, second paragraph down. When we read the Bible, we read communally. Think about it. The Bible you read, the book itself, is a communal project. So my mind in this event inevitably goes to Acts 8:31 with the Ethiopian eunuch. He's sitting there reading Isaiah by himself, just him, Jesus, and his Bible. And Philip runs alongside the chariot and he says, do you understand what you're reading? And the Ethiopian says, how can I unless someone explains it to me? And if we think about it, we have there's the Bible is so immense and so full. There's many things that are perspicuous that someone walking along the street could pick it up by themselves and grasp certain things, the doctrine of perspicuity of the scriptures. However, it's just like the Ethiopian eunuch. We need others to help us to understand. And this is true whether it's our pastor at church, or our mom or our dad or a brother, or something that people don't often think about is that whenever we read the confessions or the patristic, the church fathers, or any of the men in between their time and now, those are all part of that community that explains what the Bible means to us. So I very much enjoyed that sentence of his.
And that's very important as well, because I've been seeing this a lot lately too, in some interactions I've had with individuals that want to attack Calvinism, not our conversation for tonight, but they'll want to attack Calvinism and they'll say, well, you read all these other books instead of just reading the Bible. But the danger, like, we can read the Bible and the Spirit is our teacher. So the Spirit's going to lead you into all truth. Right. But the danger can be when we've seen people reading the Bible and taking the Bible for not what it's actually saying, but inserting something into the Bible and coming up with some new doctrine that's never been taught throughout church history, and coming up with some new religion like Mormonism or Jehovah's Witnesses or something other than that, right. Hebrew Israelites, whatever it may be. And they're trying to read something there where if they looked at this communal, these brothers and sisters that came before us, that labored over the scriptures and worked together to come to proper understanding and not go off into error, right? But to defend truth. We can look at that and say, okay, if it's never been taught throughout church history and we're coming up with something new in our just own individual reading of the Bible, then it's probably us that is off and not these people that we're reading.
Right.
Yeah. I think to think about it, like even you quoted Deuteronomy 6, I think even in connection with Jude, I think it's 4, maybe 5, about the gospel once delivered to all the saints. And you look at it, yes, we're a part of a community, we're part of a covenant together, and we have these outposts of these covenants in our local towns. We go to them, we go to hear God speak through the pastor. Well, if he's studying other pastors, theologians who are thinking about these things, who have been taught by things, who have been taught by them. We stand on the shoulders of giants, those who come before us. So we have to understand that communal aspect, and even in our teaching.
Right.
But yet in the end, that teaching has to be personalized in me.
Right.
That it's not the group that falls into sin. I fall into sin. I need my mind to be changed so that I work out my salvation in fear and trembling. That I can go do it. So you need the whole for the individual.
Right.
We grow together. We come to church, we fellowship, and we grow together as the pastor leads us through what hopefully, prayerfully, the Spirit has led on his heart to do, to teach through. And there is that both and. I mean, he mentions the Lord's Prayer. It's not my Father, but our Father, the paragraph before it.
Right.
But just before this, well, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go to your secret place. This is a place where you come to commune with God, the triune God. Yes, Jesus is there. The Spirit is on our behalf there, speaking things that are of God that we cannot say. But it's both and they are our Father, as the Baptist Catechism kind of points out in teaching on this, is to make it recognize that, yes, it's not just us.
Right.
But that we pray with and for others. And so there's this, again, you kind of mentioned that the one and the many. We are one, but there is many of us. There is one God in three persons who commune together, yet we know them by their actions. The Son in accomplishing redemption, the Spirit applying him. Now, we talked about what this kind of all means in the grand scheme of things a couple weeks ago, and divine operations and inseparable operations, but it's still that the one and the many, and these ideas that work out for it. I think pushing it where evangelicals tend to be all about my personal relationship and almost too much focus, in which they, in one sense, hate the corporate life.
Right.
The gathering together. We just go to church because that's what we do, instead of expecting to meet the triune God with other believers in a community.
Right.
It's those balances. So to kind of, as we started, it's not contrary to it. It's both. That balance, having, yes, I'm responsible for my faith, and I'm responsible to make sure I'm partaking within the community.
Right.
But it's not just the community.
Right. So definitely like what you said there, Mike, especially about our basically our walk and how we are held accountable as individuals for doing these things for ourselves, right? A verse I was going to go to next was but encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And it's just like you said, you're accountable for your own sin. However, the author of the Hebrews says to encourage one another so you won't be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And later in the article, near the tail end, Chad Bird is saying, for I know what would happen. I would end up making, in my mind, reshaping my personal Jesus into a strikingly familiar image, the image of me. And that goes with this hardening of our hearts by the deceitfulness of sin, because my Jesus, it's as I like to think of him all on my own with Jesus in my Bible, is my sinful, deceitful flesh is going to deceive me into thinking all sorts of things. And that's why for our personal uh, accountability, like you said, we need the body to um, need them to encourage us one another each day, so that we don't get hardened and we bounce ideas off of each other, or they see something in us that is out of step with the truth of the gospel. And again, the author says in chapter 10, he says, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking the assembly, forsaking our assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, all the more as you see the day draw near. So my good deeds that I have to do, other believers are supposed to stimulate me and to say, hey, do this, good job, keep going. Have you thought about doing this? So for not only for not sinning, which I'm personally accountable for, and also for good deeds, which I am personally accountable for he who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, for him that is sin, James says. So for both of those things that I'm personally accountable for, the author of the Hebrews says, I need other people to do this. So it's just like you're saying, Mike, it's got to be a balance. It's both. It's both. It's the one and the many. I am one person responsible, or I'm one of the many responsible, and the one church is responsible for the other members encouraging me. So it's all of those commandments that we need other believers to be able to fulfill. I can't stimulate anyone to good deeds if I'm not around anybody. Thoughts? Any thoughts? I'll move on if there's no thoughts. We kind of wrapped that one up, I guess.
I was just
go ahead.
Kind of thinking about even his pushback. He's mentioned a little bit, kind of in a song. We probably all know it. But I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses.
Don't people universally
and
hate?
He walks with
There you
me,
go.
and
Yep.
He talks with me.
Yeah.
So, this is over 100 years old, this hymn. So obviously we have this.
Yeah.
What they're reacting to isn't new in one sense. It's been around for a century.
Right.
But even when we consider church history, you have the monastic movement,
Right.
which is kind of that separation, the desert fathers who would spend time by themselves,
Right.
with asceticism in the desert,
Right.
thinking about things of God. And so even we see this outworking within it. But I think it's having, these balances. We're called to stir one another up in good works, and to be in it and to do it. But we also have elements like in Romans 8, where the Spirit confesses to our spirit that we're sons of God. It's a very personal moment. Probably, in line of the reading and praying and having the Spirit testify to us about our relationship with the triune God.
Right.
And there, in this kind of overreaction, really kind of moving towards kind of before modernity, and I mean, in America plays a part in this, and kind of individual rights and having to do that. I think we need to recognize our culture in it. I mean, in one sense, you can say his pushing it back is even related to the deviations of the LGBT community,
Right.
and the autonomy and the person, the individual. But yet even in that, they need a community. It's not, yes, it's my personal identity in their case, but they have it within a community. And this is the same. I have a relationship with the Lord. The Lord had saved me. I've called upon the Lord, obviously, in understanding that it is the Lord who has regenerated me and making these professions.
Right.
And then he has brought to me a people to help me to grow.
Right.
But it still has to be my faith.
Right.
And I have to work on growing it in sanctification and appealing to the Spirit in prayer while I pray for others and I look at others. And so, I mean, you can have religious encounters in the secret garden.
Yeah.
Where you walk alone. But you also have you should have those same encounters coming together in fellowship with other believers.
And I think part of, again, the having the body around with you, and that's why, again, we don't want to go too far to one ditch or to the other. We want to stay balanced. Right. Having that can keep us from having some emotional, individualistic experience that might not really be from God. And those brothers and sisters around you can say, hey, bro, hey, sister, I think you're going off into a more experiential kind of understanding of God that you think you're claiming is of God, but that doesn't line up with Scripture to keep you accountable. So those things, there's those benefits to that, because what I see often, and this is why I think people sometimes overcorrect, is because it becomes my personal relationship with Jesus is void of the Scripture. It's void of the church. Therefore, I have this understanding of Jesus, and the Jesus I know isn't like the Jesus you're talking about, you Pharisee, you judgmental Christian who's standing on the streets telling people to turn to Christ, because that's not my Jesus, right? And so therefore there's this benefit to having the body and not completely disconnecting yourself from it, because that is, God did call us to be a part of this. It's his body, the hand, the feet coming together, him being the head. But that doesn't, again, take away from the fact that we have that personal relationship with Christ. Right. But there's a balance. This is what I think we really want to make sure that you're getting that out of this here tonight. And I think that's what's being accomplished, I believe. But is that there's a balance here. We can say, yes, corporately, we see that it's there. Personally, we see that it's there. You know, when I'm struggling, and this week going through the loss of a family member, and then Christ comes and he comforts me, right? When you're going through something, you're comforted. But he also uses the body to do that as well, to come alongside and comfort you.
Right, most definitely. I think there's the opposite ditch too. There's several groups within the Christian culture that whether they're it's definitely outside the bounds of orthodoxy. So we see groups like the New Perspective, as much as I know. So if I'm misunderstanding you, I haven't looked that deep into it. So Federal Vision, the New Perspective on Paul, the Roman Catholic Church, all make, it seems to me, to make an error towards this corporate relationship where the main thrust of things is that being united to the covenant community, and almost as though salvation were contingent upon being membership to that. It's definitely true of Roman Catholicism. If you're not a member of the true church, then you're in some trouble. Now, more liberal councils, I think, have taken a different angle on that, but you can make the opposite error where you're either requiring people that if you're not a part of the true church, even probably in landmarkism would be another one, that you're not even saved, you're going to hell, you're a heretic or whatever. Or it could just be simply of the nature of such a high importance placed on the covenant community that maybe the initial doctrine isn't so raunchy, but the effect of it will lead an individual believer to think, well, I go to church, I've been baptized, I'm in the covenant community, and therefore everything for me is on solid footing. So I think that could be an opposite. That is an opposite error that does exist, even as much as we've pushed back on the evangelical tendency to be in a strictly personal relationship, I guess we could call it. And since we're trying to be balanced, we should probably move on to the personal side of things, discuss that a little more. Where I began with this, and a lot of people began with it when I talked to them, is that all mankind, every son of Adam and daughter of Eve, has a personal, individual relationship with the living God. In Ezekiel 18:4, God says, all souls are mine, the soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son. The soul that sins will die. In Ezekiel 18:20, he says the same thing again. The soul who sins will die. The Father will not, or the Son will not bear the punishment for the Father's iniquity, nor the Father bear the punishment for the Son's iniquity. The righteousness of the righteous will be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked will be on himself. And in Romans 2, Paul, referencing the Psalms and the Proverbs, says that there's a day coming when God will render to each person according to his deeds. And so from these collection of verses, we can see that not only does the Christian have an individual relationship before God, but each person has a individual standing before the living God, which then gets redeemed in Christianity. So that individual relationship is already there, and it's just transformed as we are redeemed.
Yeah,
that's where I began the discussion of that topic in my mind. Any thoughts on that, or should we keep moving?
no, I think that's good. That's a good point to hit on, because one of the things I've often heard when evangelizing is you need to get people to have a relationship, with God, and everybody has a relationship with God. Right. It's either one of enmity or it's one of reconciliation, right? You're either a child of God, a friend of God, or you're at enmity with God, but you have a relationship. You have a starting point, right? But when you come to Christ, there is this personal. Here's another thing, right? Logos, the word logos in John 1.
Yeah.
Right. I was reading through this because we was doing a study on it a few weeks ago here at my house. We was having a Bible study on it. And John 1, when it talks about the logos, John, inspired by the Holy Spirit, knew exactly what he was doing when he used this word, because the Greeks understood logos to mean this creator, this power, all supreme being who creates but kind of pulls away from his creation. Whereas the Jews would have understood this as well, this word logos, as they understood in the Old Testament. You have this, the word of the Lord came, the word of the Lord came, the word of the Lord came. And John connects this and says, this isn't as the Greeks. So the Jews would have understood this logos, the word of the Lord coming. The Greeks would have had this understanding of the word, or this creator, this supreme being, but one that's distant from having a relationship with his creation. But John says, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And he talks about the one whom God loved. So he's letting it be known to the Jews, not only this word of the Lord that came, this is the word, this is God incarnate here. Right. And to the Greeks, not this God, this creator who just comes or creates and then steps away and has no relationship with his creation. No, he comes and tabernacles amongst his creation and loves and is compassionate and caring, and he's interacting with his creation. Right. And so you see that even in John. So it's this personal God,
Right.
and we each have that person. And that's why it's important for us to not neglect it, not say we don't have a personal relationship with Christ. If you don't have a personal relationship with Christ, something's wrong, right?
Right.
But not at the expense of saying that we don't have a religion either. It's balance.
Balance.
Balance, Daniel-san, balance.
Yeah. If we think about, if we read the Gospels, Jesus was indeed the Word that became flesh, and he was and is and continueth to be forever, both God and man, in two distinct natures in one person. And so Jesus, as a man in the appearance of a man, walked the earth, and so he is an individual. So if you think about every encounter, every miracle that he performed, every person he called, it was always they went to Jesus personally. Now there was you could see the corporate relationship as well, as you see the one fellow lowered down through the roof with a mat. So there's a beauty there as well, as we see the corporate and the personal, as Jesus personally heals him and forgives his personal sins. One passage that really is lovely to this effect. So in John 11, when Lazarus falls ill, word sent to him, or word is sent to Jesus, and they say, "Lord, behold, the one whom you love is sick." And then later on in verse 5, we're told also that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And so we see also, as you mentioned, John describes himself anonymously 5 times as the one Jesus loved. And so we see this beauty here that Jesus loves each of these people. It mentions each of them by name in John 11. Martha, I guess her sister, but it's a specific person, and Lazarus. He loved them. And that's a specific love. He doesn't just have that love for his bride mentioned in his Ephesians 5, where he loved his bride and laid his life down for her, but he has love each individually for those saints, Martha, her sister Mary, and Lazarus. So we see, I just think it's very beautiful that Jesus is said to love each one of them individually.
Yeah. Mike, any thoughts? Coming down to the end here.
I got a couple. James chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. James here has just talked about the law, about hearers and doers. And then he says, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to visit the orphans, the widows in their afflictions, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And when you look at the pronouns in the original language, it's singular. The verb, if anyone thinks he is religious, is eimi, which is first person singular in it. So a person has to think about their religion. And here I think religion is just not generic, but is the gospel.
Right.
And that this religion then is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this. And then you see the corporate outworking: to visit the orphans, the widows in their afflictions. And then the personal: keep oneself unstained from the world.
Right.
And then he goes on to the sin of partiality, where he talks about faith and works and how faith is never alone. Faith is accompanied by works of faith, that one can see someone's works and see their faith. It's in that sense, it justifies their faith, that the works show evidence towards them. We've discussed this in other podcasts. But I think when we think about these ideas, the biblical authors kind of just go in and out between the personal and individual and the corporate. and moving through. And you see the same thing in Judges. So they've defeated Jericho. God has brought down the walls. They have looted the city. They have saved Rehab. And now they're going to hit this insignificant town of Ai, take it over. But they lose. Much bigger army, small town, should have won, but they don't. God judges them corporately. But what we find out in that God judges them was because someone had sin individualistically. The sin of Achan, stealing things that were devoted for destruction. Again, we can't make that kind of hard line between the corporate and the individual.
Right.
They affect each. There's an effect with both.
Right.
Achan's sin caused 36 men to be killed, or they fled. Yeah, killed about 36 men. There was a punishment on the corporate.
Right.
But that didn't exonerate Achan and his sin. His and his family would face what was the consequence for doing what God had forbid and taking things devoted for destruction. And I think this is how the Bible even lays it out. The covenant with Adam is a covenant with Adam that would be passed on to his generation, but it's with Adam. It's not with Sarai or with any. Now there's that federal headship that he does have. And again, so even with that understanding, it's both. And which then calls us to think about what's important about all this. Well, we need the church for our own personal growth. And that going to church and hearing is good. And in some sense, probably better than just being by myself and reading my Bible. But I grow in both. And there's a refining in both, that I can bring what I learn and I can be taught what other people are being learned, and we can grow in community as we go.
Right.
And that, yes, as the author said, Christianity isn't about desert Christians living on their own and doing their own thing. They live in community, but they also need to be mindful of their own standing before God and what is sin, and making sure that they do what that God has called them to do, and that is to live in community.
Right.
And that brings up a thought for maybe a possible show down the road, where can community go too far?
Ooh.
Because I'm thinking of communal groups, right? Because I'm thinking of some of the Jonestown and some of these groups that they isolate themselves. Or even I've seen there's some groups that have issue with the church, and then they believe they're doing church as we see it in the book of Acts. We're doing life together. We're doing all these things. And then it's like, but there's constant direct shots at the church.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas, go ahead.
Or I mean, even, and I'm sure I did this some in my younger years as a Christian, where you're on your social media and you're constantly taking shots at the church. Oh, the church is so bad at this and that other thing. You know, maybe it's just you on social media doing the same thing, like you're saying, taking shots at the church. Because it's not just my local church that I'm a member of. It's your local church. It's the Presbyterian church. It's even our friend the Lutheran, assuming they're confessional Lutherans. Even that church we're members of. So consistently being not disagreeing. I'm not talking about disagreeing, having polemical arguments. I'm talking about like just slams on the church. I think that's best shows a sign of immaturity, and at worst, I don't know, other things.
Yeah, because the communal aspect is a good thing. We do community. We do life together. When we go to church, and the people that I am involved with in my local church, and you get to know them, you get to do life together with them. But it's not that we're together every single day. And I've seen some that are bringing together this kind of feel of like, let's be like Acts, where we're living together and we're sharing meals all the time together. And those are great if you can do those things. But sometimes those things don't happen. It doesn't mean you're less of a community. Right. So that's why I'm saying maybe that's a thought, maybe something we can do down the road. And I got some things in mind, but I have a particular group in mind. But yeah. So any other thoughts, Nathaniel? You've been our guest tonight, even though you are a good friend of the program here. The original Natty P is back tonight for this episode. Any last thoughts, man? Because this is an article that you brought to us. So.
All right, so I guess the last piece of evidence that I would give for everything that we've discussed, we talked about the corporate, we've talked about the individual, and we've talked about the need for balance in both. If you can't see this yet and you're still confused, even after all we said, I'll just encourage you, look for this. Read the book of Psalms. These are 150 prayers, depending on your faith tradition. Certain denominations, and even the Jews and the Catholics will divide it up a little different. But if you don't see this balance yet, read the Psalms, because you have something like Psalm 49, 1 that says, "Sing to the Lord a new song and sing His praise in the congregation." And you have something like Psalm 3, where David says, "I cried to the Lord I was crying to the Lord with my voice, and He answered me from His holy mountain." So you see this balance, this beautiful balance. And sometimes even in the same Psalms, you will see this. If you read all 150, learn them, you'll see this balance and this dual nature of the individual relationship and the corporate relationship. That would be, I guess, the coup de grace. If you don't take it from what we've said here, you will definitely see it in the Psalms. So try that exercise if you're still having trouble.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. You look like you're going to say something. Close us out, brother.
Gramley says that these notes have a score of 78. There's some errors in there. Just kind of.
What's that? Oh, on my paper that I sent to everybody? Yeah. Oh, who cares?
I was wondering, like, what are you talking about?
That's the privilege of not being a scholar nor in seminary. I can do my own style, the NAP style guide.
So,
but Grammarly, if you'd like to sponsor us, because I'm just saying,
I'll start writing good if they sponsor you.
So, no, that's all I got.
All right. Well, that's been G220 Radio for tonight. Nathaniel, thanks for coming back on the program with us. It's always a pleasure, bro. Don't be a stranger. And Mike, next week we will be back. We'll be talking about something. I don't know. I don't think we've gone out that far, but we will be back. We'll be talking about something that has to deal with the Bible, because that's what we do here. It's conversations with real people about spiritual things. So join us next week, G220 Radio, 9 p.m. Eastern, every Tuesday night. And share, like, tell a friend, let them know. And if there's any kind of conversation you would love to hear us have a talk about or discuss, email us at g220radio@gmail.com. Again, you can email us at g220radio@gmail.com. If you don't want to listen to us or watch us via YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching us, or Twitter, if you're watching us over there, you can listen to the podcast on Podbean or any podcast catcher. That's Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to them. You can follow us there as well. Yeah, that's been G220 Radio. What's that?
I was just going to say, leave a comment, drop a 5-star review on the podcatcher.
Yeah, there you go. Leave that. It may help us. It may not.
Who knows?
Those who watch. Those who don't, they don't. They missing out. But that's okay. God bless and good night.